there's a lot of bad blood inside the Congress, because the Senate was actually the chamber where there was most agreement on funding Ukraine. In the House of Representatives, there's long been growing antagonism, you might say American isolationism. They've been trying to put a brake on funding ever since the Republicans took control of the House of Representatives in the last midterms a year ago. But the Senate, where they've been having a lot of agreement on Ukraine, has now also fallen into the trenches.
What's going on in Congress tonight on that crucial vote?
Yeah, Lord Cameron has arrived in the middle of a political firestorm over here, because Biden went all out in appealing to Republicans, as you just heard, to pass a motion that would have set up this huge funding bill, another $61 billion for Ukraine and $14 billion for Israel. But every single Republican has just lined up to reject that motion, as you say, within the last half an hour, because they are furious that the bill doesn't contain enough security measures for the southern US border. They've been saying that they want immigration reforms because too many migrants are seeking asylum or just illegally crossing the border into America. And this really has become a bit of an election year battle, because immigration, of course, is going to be Trump's top card in the election. And it's really near the top of the Republican wish list for getting something out of Congress before they break up for Christmas. So this vote that's just happened has really sent the negotiators back to the drawing board. And there's a lot of bad blood inside the Congress, because the Senate was actually the chamber where there was most agreement on funding Ukraine. In the House of Representatives, there's long been growing antagonism, you might say American isolationism. They've been trying to put a brake on funding ever since the Republicans took control of the House of Representatives in the last midterms a year ago. But the Senate, where they've been having a lot of agreement on Ukraine, has now also fallen into the trenches.
Yeah, I mean, there's been a huge amount of political wrangling. And I mean, just the idea that the Republicans are tying the idea of more military funding for Ukraine to what happens on the US southern border. I mean, it seems as though they're trying to get their own domestic priorities through on the back of it. And the result seems to be that, I mean, this has been held up for months now. We had President Zelensky warning that supplies are actually starting to run seriously low.
Well, Biden's message this afternoon, he had a hastily organised speech, you had a couple of quotes from it just then, was that the money that America's provided, it's over $100 billion already. That's going to run out by the end of the year. And that will kneecap Ukraine on the battlefield, he said. And history will judge America very harshly, and the Republicans in particular, if they don't keep passing these funding bills. But the Republicans, there really is a growing resistance to spending so much money without getting something that their supporters really want. And so that's where we are at the moment. They want Biden to start building the border wall again. So they're miles apart at the moment, because Biden stopped building Trump's border wall on his first day in office.
And as we, of course, approach election year, all of this is playing into the political positioning, isn't it? And I mean, you mentioned that US border wall. We've had President Trump saying he was accused of whether he'd actually be a dictator if he were to win the election next year. And he says, well, only for one day. And that seemed to be effectively to get that border wall built.
Well, this is a strange situation that you'd get this put to an American president, a wannabe American president, of course. But in the last couple of days, Liz Cheney, the Wyoming congresswoman who was Trump's nemesis to some extent in Congress, She's got a book out warning that America is sleepwalking into a dictatorship. There's been other articles about this in the American press recently because a lot of Trump's plans have been revealed, and to a lot of Democrats and some Republicans, they seem rather authoritarian. For example, passing a measure to use the military against domestic protests, and those kind of measures. And so Trump was in a friendly situation in an Iowa debate last night that was televised by Fox News. Sean Hannity, his favorite presenter, said to him, "I'm sure you'll want to say that you won't abuse power." I'm paraphrasing, but he said words to the effect that you won't abuse the office of president when you get there. And Trump thought about it for a while and avoided the question. Then Hannity came back and said, "Well, people are saying you'll be a dictator," and Trump says, "Oh, well, a dictator only on day one," he said. And then he qualified that by saying that would be to pass measures to close the border and to start drilling for oil again and stopping all the green measures that Biden's passed. But it's obviously sent a chill through the media establishment and the Democrats. And it will be a clip that you hear played over and over again in the run up to the election.
And the concerns in Ukraine, not least from Volodymyr Zelensky, he delivered his message. His chief of staff has been there in the United States. David Cameron's whole mission there is to try to get Republicans on board with supporting Ukraine. And there is a real concern that were we to end up with a Republican, which looks as though it could well be Donald Trump back in the White House, that funding, those huge amounts of military and other supplies heading to Ukraine could dry up?
Well, Trump's election promise, of course, is that he will end the Ukraine war on day one, if not before, because he'll be elected and there'll be there's that period, there's that interim period when he gets ready for his administration. He's never really said how he's going to do it, but the only way you could do it on day one is to freeze the conflict as it is at that particular moment. So Zelensky, the Democrats in Congress, they're all on notice that should Donald Trump come back, the conflict will be frozen on the battle lines when that vote happens. So that's what they're up against. But now the Republicans are slow walking extra funding for Ukraine. It doesn't bode well for the Ukrainian attempt to push the Russians back and try and be in the most advantageous position in November 2024.